As I've always said, commitment and consistency are key to long-term healthy living. Join us as we chat with Glenn Mason, a former Assistant Deputy Minister in the federal government, who shares a really inspiring story of personal transformation with us. Come, let's listen. So today we're chatting with Glenn and Glenn Mason. Thank you for chatting with us. And one of the reasons that I wanted to speak with you, because I think you've got a really compelling and inspiring story about healthy living. And I thought it was important for our viewers to hear about it. So to begin, can you tell the viewers a little bit about yourself and tell us your story?
Well, thanks, Marlene. My name is Glenn Mason, and I just turned 60 years old, and I had a long, 30-year career with the federal government. I live in Gatineau, and I have two kids that are now in their early 20s.
Well, that's amazing. And where did how does your healthy living story and journey begin? Because I found it immensely inspiring.
Well, it begins pretty much 6 years ago at this very time. I had what I think academics might call a polycrisis, which is I had many things happen to me all at the same time. And they included the end of my marriage, my children having some issues, personally being diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, and also clearly, in retrospect, I was drinking too much, and a number of things, they all came together, and I decided that I had to take some time off work to deal with them. And it was really, I think the type 2 diabetes diagnosis from my doctor, who was really hardcore about dealing with diabetes, really forced me to focus on my health and my lifestyle and make changes. And so at that time, I took an extended period of time off work. I made what I think people would consider some pretty radical changes, which I would admit I don't think I could have done while I was working, because I had a very senior job with the Government of Canada. I was working long hours. I was stressed out. I didn't realize it, to be honest, but I was stress eating, I was stress drinking, and I wasn't taking care of my health at all. And so what I did at the time was I stopped drinking immediately. I started intermittent fasting. I changed my eating habits dramatically, and I was pretty hardcore in terms of avoiding sugar and carbs, things that would be problematic for a diabetic. And I started exercising, and in particular I started walking. I started walking an hour a day. And my commitment to myself at the time was to get down to 200 pounds, which I thought was a real stretch goal, because I don't know exactly, but I was certainly around 250 pounds, maybe. So, and while my doctor put me on meds briefly, I decided I wanted to try to do it without meds, because type 2 diabetes is a lifestyle disease. And I had gotten myself there, maybe with the help of drugs such as alcohol, but I wanted to get off of it through diet and exercise. And that's what I did. I mean, in retrospect, it was hardcore enough that I don't think I could have done it while working full time, because the demands, in particular, I chose intermittent fasting based on the work of a Dr. Fung in Toronto, who my sister had introduced me to, and I followed his work on YouTube and bought some of his books. And he very clearly made the link between eating and insulin production, and the fact that the only way to really avoid insulin production is to not eat. And so I was, in retrospect, much too hardcore. I began fasting 20 hours a day. I was doing long fasts, like 3 days, which I don't really do anymore. Now I do a 16 and 8. Fasting, which is much more much easier and easier to maintain a lifestyle where you interact with other people, where you can go out for dinner and do things with other people. But cutting out alcohol and dramatically reducing carbs and walking every day for at least an hour really made a difference. And I fairly quickly lost, initially 60 pounds, but I ultimately stabilized at around 190, 195, which was still up from, what maybe BMI would suggest that I should be for my height and so on, but was a dramatic change such that none of my clothes fit anymore, but I felt so much better. And, I think the big thing for me is that I've been able to maintain it. And it's one thing, to take on a change, to lose weight, but then to put it back on, which is pretty typical, I think, statistically, of people that follow diets. And so for me, it was never about a diet. It was about a lifestyle. And so it was very, very much about changing how I presented myself, how I lived, which was living a life of, that included exercise on a daily basis. And so, if the weather is such that I didn't want to walk for an hour, I would still get out and walk for 15 or 20 minutes or half an hour. I will exercise every day, and I've changed my relationship with food. Even though, to be honest, cooking is one of my favorite activities, one of my hobbies. I love to cook. And in fact, it's one of the things that I rediscovered during the pandemic. So while in the pandemic, for many people, they were discovering Uber Eats and Skip the Dishes and were increasing their intake of alcohol. I was actually going the opposite way. And so the pandemic was actually a good time for me because I had my kids around. I spent more time with them, invested in those relationships, such that those relationships are better today than they were before. My love of cooking has returned, and it's one of the things, particularly during the winter, that I do a lot. I returned to gardening and outdoor activities like canoeing and hiking. And just before this, I had actually had a knee replacement, which was, again, another big lifestyle change because it was based on a soccer injury from grade 9 that I had knee problems. I've been through multiple knee surgeries. I was bone on bone. I couldn't walk more than a block without limping. But eventually I found a doctor who at 54, turning 55, agreed to do a knee replacement here in Gatineau. And I was very lucky to have that. And so post that operation, it was for me also very much about rediscovering the joy of hiking and getting outdoors and living the life that I had been, in a sense, unable to live for the past kind of 15, 20 years.
That is such an amazing story, Glenn. And you said so many things that I think would be immensely important for our viewers, particularly because it's not about diet, you're right, it's about lifestyle. But I think a lot of people are probably wondering, it's not easy to change what you're used to for many years, right? And I'm sure a lot of our viewers are wondering, how did you do that? And how long did it take you to first to see results and to feel as if it's just part of who you are and way of being?
Well, I think the how was the shock that I received when my doctor, gave me the diagnosis of diabetes, of type 2 diabetes. Sure, I had been pre-diabetic for probably a decade, but never took it seriously. Knew a little bit about nutrition, but not enough to change very much. I could have told you what the Mediterranean diet was, for instance, but I probably wasn't following it. And I was drinking far too much. And so it was that shock of that moment and everything that happened at that time, which gave me the strength to commit to making lifestyle changes and taking an extended period of time off work allowed me the flexibility to make those changes in life without the additional stress. Because, I'll be honest, I clearly was stress eating at the time. And while we ate, I think mostly at home, I traveled a lot. I didn't, or I had difficulty maintaining any kind of regular diet when I was traveling. And, I would repeat, I was drinking far too much. So, I think it was that shock of the polycrisis, if you will, that allowed me to kind of grab myself by the scruff of my neck and say, this is do or die. That gave me the impetus. And then the time off work gave me the time to develop habits. And I very, very quickly decided, I think this was from, some of the reading that I did, because of course, given my nature, I dived into data and dived into research and learning about diabetes and lifestyle and nutrition. And very quickly decided this wasn't about a diet. This wasn't about just changing. It was very much about a lifestyle change that I needed to make for the rest of my life if I wanted to live a long life, which of course I think most of us do. So I think it was that, and then concomitant with that was developing new habits that I could follow. And so for me, one of the key things is I'm looking for habits that I can do for the rest of my life. I'm not looking for habits that require me to join something, that require me to have a membership or subscription to something with ongoing costs. I'm looking for habits that I can do well into my elder years. And so walking is one of those. All you need are a pair of shoes and weather-appropriate clothes, and you can walk. The other aspect for me in winter is cross-country skiing, which is a fabulous exercise. And here in Gatineau, we're privileged to have the Gatineau Park, 25 minutes from my house. Cross-country skiing is such a wonderful exercise. And so that's what I do quite a bit in winter. I replace my outside walking with cross-country skiing as much as I can. And so those are habits that yes, with cross-country skiing, you need a little bit of equipment, but it's not particularly expensive and lasts many, many years. So those are habits that I've developed that I can keep. If you go up to the Gatineaus on a Monday morning, you will see a lot of very senior people filling the trails cross-country skiing. And you will see people cross-country skiing into their 80s. And so that's a sport that I hope that I can do into my later years. And then the other is just kind of my relationship with food. And for me, intermittent fasting has worked and has worked marvelously. That doesn't make it right for everybody else. I think everybody needs to look at their own situation. For me, I didn't take up intermittent fasting to lose weight. I took it up to control insulin. And so my purpose wasn't primarily about weight loss. And my journey was, in fact, not guided by weight loss. It was guided very much by controlling my diabetes and finding a way to live with these changes in a way that would control my blood glucose. And so, I think those things were key to it. And then, as I said, while the rest of the world was discovering Uber Eats, I was rediscovering my kitchen, and I was exploring, and at the same time I had discovered YouTube and found that you could learn an awful lot on YouTube about cooking, about all sorts of things, and so I delved deeply into my own relationship with cooking and food, and I think that was a key part for me as well of developing habits that are very much built around cooking what I eat at home. And, I think those are probably the key reasons that allowed me to be successful. I was seeing results within months, for sure, like visible and physical results, and certainly by 6 months, it was pretty dramatic. Like, the weight came off quickly, but I will admit that I would even say too hardcore. Like, I wouldn't recommend anybody, just jump into 20-hour fasts or 3-day fasts as I did at the time. I think it would be much better to start a little bit slower and to take it a little bit easier. But I was determined to get results and to get results as quickly as I could. And I felt the only person I was responsible for was myself. In retrospect, picking up the kids at 3:30 after school in high school when you haven't yet eaten, certainly led me to being hangry at times, which I wish if I could go back, I would have adjusted my eating schedule such that I was eating before that. But those are choices that I made, and they absolutely worked for me. And it wasn't complex. It was really just those 3 or 4 simple things: changing what I ate, changing when I ate, cutting out alcohol, adding exercise, and above all, being consistent. Just doing it every day based on the belief that it's not a diet, it's a change in lifestyle. So if I want to change my lifestyle, I got to do it. I got to do it every day. So, I think those elements came together, and now 6 years on, I've kept the weight off. I've been able to take it a little bit lower, but my body seems pretty comfortable at around 190, and I've been able to get back to hiking, and I've been very active with hiking and canoeing, and been able to enjoy those activities which I really struggled to enjoy for the last 15 years at least. During the pandemic, I decided I wanted to go for a long walk, and I first looked at the Camino, and then I decided it wasn't remote and wild enough for me. There was too many people on the Camino, and I wanted to go away to Europe and go hiking, and then I wanted to go to the States and go hiking. But all of that travel was cut off to us during the pandemic. So I discovered this trail called the Great Divide Trail, which is the Canadian, if you will, extension of the Continental Divide Trail in the States. And it goes from the Montana border up to northern BC to Kakwa Lake for about 1,150 kilometers. And I decided I was going to hike that trail. And it's a very, very tough trail. And it's quite remote. And I wanted to find out, it was really the coming out for my new knee. Like, was my new knee going to hold up? And in fact, my new knee has proven to be the most robust part of my body. It's the part that hurts the least when I hike. And so I've been what's called section hiking, which is each year I try to get out and hike about 200 kilometers or so. So I've been up and down, but this year I did about 400 kilometers and turned 60 on the trail this year. And I've got about 300 kilometers left. And so I hope to finish those 300 kilometers from Jasper to Kakwa Lake next year. And I have to tell you, this year I spent 21 or 22 days on the trail, and I could have kept going. I felt strong. I felt good by the end of that by the end of that period. And I've discovered new friends, through the process. Generally meeting up with other hikers through the Facebook page for the Great Divide Trail. I joined the board of the Great Divide Trail Association during this period and served a 3-year term on the board, and now I still serve on one of the subcommittees. And I saw a book review in the Washington Post by Andrew McCarthy, who was one of the what was called the Brat Pack or the Rat Pack from the 1980s, from Hollywood, and he had hiked the Camino for the second time for him, but he had walked it with his son, who was 19 or 20. And I immediately thought, that's what I want to do, because my son was right at about that age, about turning 19, finishing high school. I knew he would have the time, I knew I had the time, and Andrew McCarthy had this wonderful phrase. He characterized it as a vaccination against fear. The fear of your child growing old, growing into adulthood, that period where you lose your children from childhood and they become adults. And I mean, it's all natural, but as a parent, you you don't want to lose your children. You fear losing them. And so I fired off a text to him. I said, you want to go for a walk when you finish high school? And he said, sure. And I said, are you sure? And I sent him a link to the book review. And I don't think he fully understood, but so I went back to him to clarify a couple of times. But he did. And eventually, a few months later, in the fall of 2023, we did together go off to France. We started in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, and we walked the about 900 kilometers to Santiago de Compostela in Spain, over around 40 days, something like that. And we had a marvelous time, and it was for both of us will be a lifelong memory, and physically much easier than walking the Great Divide Trail, but still a real commitment. When you commit to walking about 24-25 kilometers every day for 40 days or so, it's a real time and physical commitment, and had a wonderful time. And I hope to be able to do that type of thing again. There's like 26 different Camino routes, so there's other Caminos, but also lots of other hiking, and hiking happens to be one of the activities that I really enjoy.
What keeps you motivated to keep doing this?
I've always been a very goal-oriented person, so I tend to set out goals to give me focus, to give the daily activity kind of more of a long-term focus. But in the case of like a broad lifestyle change like that, it's very much just about being healthy. And, as I said, I turned 60 this year, and I would say at 60, I'm healthier than I was at 50, which was a goal of mine. But it doesn't mean that I feel better than when I was 20, right? Like, we start to feel old, and things start hurting that didn't hurt before. And mortality, begins to present itself to you. And I think for me, it's that constant reminder each and every day as I get up that I'm not getting any younger. Life's physically not getting any easier. There's things that are difficult to do today that were a lot easier 20 or 30 years ago. And I do follow some of the longevity research and such that's going on, and there's things that I know I need to do that I am still struggling to incorporate in my lifestyle. For instance, resistance training. It's very clear now that as we age, we need to include resistance training. I'm not yet consistently doing that. Partly it's because it's hard to form new habits, partly because it's difficult, and partly it's because each time that I've tried it, I've hurt something. And then when you hurt something, you step back, and then you get in. At my age, when you hurt something, it involves a tendon or a ligament or a muscle, it takes, I'm going to say, twice as long to repair and to feel better as when you're 25. And so you get set back, and you're hesitant to get back into it. But that's an example of something where I know what I need to do, and I know that I need to incorporate it, and I'm still, I've got the pieces set, and I need to dive in. I'm attracted, again, working on my principles of, minimal equipment, activities you can do into your old age. I'm attracted to isometrics and calisthenics, things that rely on body weight, that don't require me to go to a gym and use very expensive equipment that can only be found in a gym, but rather to do things that use my physical body as a weight, and things that I can do at home. And so that's that's my bias towards doing simple things that can make a big difference. And so, I think that's kind of my guiding principle. I'll never be done. This isn't a journey that kind of finishes. It's also, very clear to me that if unattended, if I ignore the benefits that I've made, my blood glucose will go right back up. I can get back into trouble physically, health-wise, very quickly. Whether it's my genetics and what my body tends towards, or the foods that are out there. I know and I see it because I do use a continuous glucose monitor. That my my body, my weight, will change very quickly if I don't continue. So I could say, today, another aspect, today we have so many options for, what are broadly called wearables. So I have been using a Fitbit for a number of years, and I've just decided to upgrade to an Apple Watch. And that's, for me, because I'm inside the Apple ecosystem, that works for me. But for me, it's very much about being able to track my sleep and my activities, and some of the other sensors that are on the wearable. I think these things are extremely valuable to all of us in terms of monitoring what our bodies are doing and how different things affect our body. So I can see if I eat one of my homemade blueberry cream scones, I can see exactly what happens to my blood sugar, and that's marvelous. And those are things I didn't have 6-7 years ago. For me, those are quite new. So that's I think what keeps me focused is that realization on an almost daily basis that I'm deeply mortal, and if I don't take care of myself, nobody else will.
But at the same time, you say 60. 60 is the new 50, right?
No, and I intend to live as close to 100 or more as possible. But without kind of specifically name dropping, but Peter Attia, who's let's call him a longevity doctor, in his recent book, talks about both lifespan and health span. And that was an interesting idea for me because his point, and Ricky Gervais has a really funny skit about 90-year-olds and his eating, sausages. And the point that he makes is, if you can give me an extra 10 years on my life, I want them in my 20s. Don't give them to me in my 90s because I'm not going to enjoy them. And the point that Peter Attia makes is that talking about lifespan is one thing. You can live to 100. But if the last 10 or 15 years of your life are physically unpleasant, you're not going to enjoy them nearly as much as if you are able to run, walk, move about, And so all of us know elderly. My father's 93 or 4 now. And we see how difficult it is for people of that age, and you have mental complications, but you have a lot of physical complications. And the point about physical exercise and physical activity and taking care of yourself is that as you reach those elder years, if you are physically healthier, you will enjoy them and be able to enjoy those around you much more. And so I don't want to be in my 90s but unable to get out of my chair or my bed. And so that's really what I'm working toward, is the idea of being physically active late into life. I would like to be able to say in my 80s that I can still go to the Gatineau Hills and cross-country ski. And so that's really, what I'm searching for is that health span, not just staying alive, but staying alive in a healthy fashion.
And what advice would you leave to our viewers, Glenn?
I think the number one would be consistent. Whatever you choose to do, it's not me that is to tell you what the right thing is, but be consistent. Do it every day, even if it's for much less time than you would like to do. Even if it's 15 minutes instead of an hour, just do it. Do it. Do it. Do it. Do it every day. They say motion is lotion. Keep moving. I think that would be my number one piece of advice. My second piece of advice would be make your own food. Stop with the skip the dishes and stop with the Uber Eats and stop with the delivery. Make your own food. Then you know what's going into your food. And I know not everybody enjoys cooking maybe as much as I do, but there are ways of making food at home that's not super complex. And I think the other that we're all learning more about is just some of the choices that we've made with regards to what we put into our bodies, whether it be alcohol or animal products, which I'm not a vegetarian, but I'm curious, and I think we all need to be much more cautious about not just how much, but what we're eating, where it's coming from, and what it's doing to our bodies. And I think the other piece that's become really clear to me as I struggled with sleep apnea, through my 50s without knowing it, is the importance of sleep and finding out, and obviously wearables help with this, but finding out how you're sleeping. And if you're not sleeping well, do something about it. Don't ignore it. I think I ignored it for far too long. That's a critical element of living well.
Thank you, Glenn. Thanks for sharing your story. That was incredible.
Let's take time for living. Let's take time for living.
Remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Thanks for tuning in.